my film looks at the importance of queer spaces, physical spaces, but nowadays those spaces are more often online, but they are as important, and media devoted to giving that space is really important because the physical spaces no longer exist. So yeah, it's about community, and community is important whether it's physical or otherwise.
So, what do you do, Jean?
I'm a teacher.
Fantastic. What do you teach?
PE. Yours? Come on in.
You got a man on the scene at the moment, then?
No, I haven't. No.
You do realise that the filler will tell you this here to distract us from what's really going on.
Not everything is political.
Of course it is.
Here at home, there's been another big demonstration against Clause 28, which seeks to stop councils from promoting homosexuality.
I've been saying this is a good idea for years. Young people have such vulnerable minds.
I think I knew that I wanted to make a film that explored certain themes, including internalized homophobia and the performative element of self, so the way that we change the way we behave when we're at work or when we're at home with our families or when we're with our colleagues. You know, we put on different masks depending on who we're with, and I knew that I wanted to make a film about that aspect of queerness and how some queer people are more happy to wear their queerness on their sleeve, you know, to present in a certain way, and some people are not, and I wanted to look at that friction within the community. And then I found an article about Section 28, this law in the UK, that was a law until 2003, and it had been repealed in 2003, but I didn't know that it had even existed because I was at school during that time. And when it was repealed, it was only one tiny little article in one of the newspapers saying that it was repealed. It was not, it was kind of forgotten about, nobody really spoke about it, and I was a teenager and I didn't know. So I was just really fascinated by the way that, the fact that I didn't know about it, and the fact that it had had this huge effect on my life, but also obviously a huge effect on many other people's lives, including the teachers who were teaching at that time, queer teachers that were teaching at that time. So I started to look at the lives of PE teachers, and I met with lots of women and talked to them about their experiences, and I was interested because I wanted to tell their story, but also to be able to put in a lot of my own experience in through this story that happened in 1988. Story set in 1988, but it's still a lot of the experiences that the character goes through in the film are things that I've experienced in the last few years. So I wanted to kind of merge those two worlds together.
Can anyone tell me what fight or flight means? Fight or flight.
What's wrong? You look stressed.
I don't want my students on every part of my life.
Every part of your life?
If anyone found out, I'd never work again.
The gay and lesbian lifestyle is not natural or normal, and it never will be.
What I don't get is how two girls actually...
Just ignore them.
Is that what you did?
I'm not talking about me.
It was important, it was definitely something I was thinking about, but I would say that in 2018 when I started writing it, there were some parallels, and then now in 2023 there's even more parallels, and the fact that it has become, I would say, eerily relevant wasn't something that I expected. I didn't really think that things would be getting as much worse as they are, but I think the conversation between things that were happening now and things that are happening in the film is becoming more and more obvious, and I think it's now impossible for people to watch the film without thinking about things that are going on around the world now. But when I wrote the first draft of the script, I don't think people thought of that so much. I think people just thought, oh, it's a film set in the 80s about this thing that happened. So that's quite depressing. I think there's a lot of people in the UK who, within the LGBT community, who would think about Section 28 and think about it as almost not a positive thing, but something that galvanized support, and people came together to fight back against Section 28. And so the community aspect of it, and the joy and the pride and the activism that arose as a result of it was almost overshadowed the law itself within the community. So I didn't want to make a film that was just about the sadness of the situation for one woman. I felt it wouldn't have been right to make that film without showing some of what was happening at the same time, the other people's experience that was very, very different. And I was also really interested always in just showing the kind of infighting within the queer community, lesbians who feel very differently to each other about the same issue, and how that can cause friction in ways that, I don't know, I haven't seen enough of that on screen, I don't think.
What kind of example are you setting for her?
Just because I don't parade my sexuality around like a badge of honour.
How is that girl ever going to learn that she has a place in this world?
Or she thinks she has a place in this world.
You're the one with the problem, not me.
This isn't a game, Lois, it's me life.
Some of the teachers who we met ended up really heavily influencing the script and the film, the story, the plot, and they were with us when we filmed the film in Newcastle when we were shooting, and they were with us in Venice when it premiered. So yeah, it is absolutely a tribute to them, and it's thanks to them that the film was really made, because there were many stumbling blocks. There were lots of people telling us that nobody would be interested in making this film, and that no audiences would be interested in seeing the film. And if it wasn't for those teachers who really wanted their story to be told, I don't think we would have had the perseverance needed to continue every time somebody said no. But we did, because we wanted to tell the story for them and to have them with us when the film finally screened for the first time. And now, even now, they're going to do Q&As in places when I can't be there. They can go and do the Q&A for the film, and it's been amazing, so special. And every Q&A I've done where one of them has been there with me, it adds so much to the experience for the audience and for me, to have that dual perspective.
She reminded me a bit of you, a deer in the headlights.
I'm not a deer in the headlights, am I?
Sometimes.
After speaking with many lesbian PE teachers, they spoke about often the paranoia that they lived with every day as a result of splintering off different parts of their personality and living a double life. Because of that paranoia and because of having to live a double life, many of them spoke about losing their mental health and sometimes having to quit their jobs or never go back into education. So that was the thing that I found kind of the most sad, but also it was what pushed some of the women we spoke to behave in ways that they regretted 30-something years later. And they regretted these actions so much that when you spoke to them, you could hear that regret. And I was interested to look at what happens when society pushes somebody so hard that they are forced to behave in ways that they don't relate to, and then 30 years later they're still thinking about, dreaming about that time and what happened and what they did. And so yeah, that was really what drew me to making a film that was a portrait of one of these women and interrogating. I think it's an interesting question always for a film. Somebody does something really bad, why do they do it? If they're not a bad person, why do they do it?
This afternoon's business in the House of Lords was brought to an abrupt uptalked by three young women who launched a commando-style raid on the chamber. They abseiled down ropes from the public gallery, landed on the floor among a chamber full of startled peers, and were hustled out by Black Rod and several doorkeepers. It was a protest against the clause in the local government bill which curbs the promotion of homosexuality by councils.
We care on this side first and foremost about children. We care about the perpetuation of the heterosexual normal family as the basis of civilized society here and in other countries.
I think I'm right in saying that our film is the third ever British film about lesbians, made by lesbians. So I think, and two of those films, 2 out of the 3, I made one and then a friend of mine made one 2 years ago or something. So I feel like that must be changing, at least in the kind of community of filmmakers I know. But I think more needs to be done. It's not, yeah, we're definitely not there yet. With Blue Jean, I was really keen to put in a lesbian relationship that starts, that started before the beginning of the film, so we don't get to see how they ended up together. We have to imagine it, and that is something that we experience all the time in straight films. There's a couple, they're married, we don't know how they got together, and it's rarely ever seen in lesbian films. I always have to watch, the longing, the can't have, the desperation, and then maybe they get together, maybe they don't, but that's usually the subject. And I wanted to show 2 women who are together, who are in love, who you don't know how they got together, they make each other laugh, they're sat on the sofa watching TV like every other couple, and that's just, there's not enough of that. Loads of female directors. I mean, Celine Sciamma is the obvious one. I remember seeing Tomboy when I was just beginning to think about wanting to make films, and it was such I remember it as such a formative experience, and I remember thinking after seeing that film, this is something I think I could spend my life doing. And I was on a mentoring program for queer filmmakers in London, and I think there were 6 of us now, all who are going on to make their first feature, and every one of us would just sit around talking about Celine Sciamma's films and how much we loved them. And I feel like her films have had a huge impact on queer filmmakers, men and women. I also loved her film. Both films, but the other day I watched Alcaraz, and I live in Mallorca, and it felt very similar. I live in the middle of the island. It's very rural, lots of fruit farming, and it felt very, very close to the area that I live. Chantal Ackerman. I mean, who else? So many different. I also love Todd Haynes. He's not a woman, but I'll throw a man in the mix. I don't believe in lists, which is why whenever anyone says, like, what's your favourite film or favourite director, I'm like, oh, who is it today? Because I think every time you're asked, it's different. And when people ask me to write lists, I'm like, okay, I'll give you these 5 films, but it's going to be different tomorrow. But I did put, when they asked me to write 5 films, I wrote, on one of them was Todd Haynes' Safe. Great film.
I'm damaged, and in a way you're not. At least you don't have to be.
I don't have to be, then why do you?